From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is from the South. We begin with breaking news out of Colombia, where the Special Jurisdiction for Peace has ordered that FARC leader Jesus Santrich be released. The court is in charge of the peace process and has asked the Attorney General's office to set him free immediately. Santrich was facing an extradition request from the United States, which accused him of drug trafficking. The court has found no evidence that would suggest any criminal act on his part and says his extradition should be turned down. And a former FARC commander was shot and killed in southwestern Colombia on Tuesday. Jorge Enrique Corredor, better known as Wilson Saavedra, is the highest-ranking commander to die in a violent attack since the peace agreement signed in 2016. Two armed men on a motorcycle shot him near the city of Tula in Valle del Cauca department. Saavedra was 49 and involved in an agricultural project with ex-combatants supported by the United Nations. This is the latest violent act against members of the community this week. On Sunday, Giovanni Murilas died in similar circumstances in Guaviare. Also, the president of the Community Action Board in Lopez, Colombia, has been killed. 45-year-old Daniel Rojas Zambrano was shot 5 times. He was a social leader and sports promoter in the Lopez Adentro municipality. Activists believe he was killed for his role in strengthening the community. And the leader of the FARC political party, Timoleon Jimenez, commonly known as Timochenko, has condemned President Iván Duque over his lack of cooperation regarding the implementation of the peace deal.
President Duque, sir, we have been requesting a meeting with you since the beginning of your government. We want to be clear about what to expect from you regarding the implementation of the peace agreement, but we haven't got a positive reaction so far.
Timochenko also criticized Colombia for having grave security problems following the assassination of FARC member Wilson Saavedra.
A great comrade, a great leader has been killed. He laid down his arms to contribute to peace and reconciliation in Colombia, but we won't let his death mean we falter.
The commander of Colombia's National Liberation Army, ELN, has flatly rejected accusations by the Colombian government against his guerrilla over its links with Venezuela. Pablo Beltrán says it is false that the Venezuelan government protects ELN members inside Venezuela or that it is using the guerrillas against Colombia.
We are present along the 2,200 kilometers of the frontier between Colombia and Venezuela, so we are well aware of all the covert attacks being carried out on a daily basis against the Venezuelan government. And since we are witnesses to that, they try to implicate us as if we were the first line of defense for the Venezuelan government. But what we have made clear is this. We hope there is no war between the two countries, because it would be very stupid to set one people to fight the other. And we will not fight in any such war, on either side. We are working to avoid such a war, and for Venezuela's problems to be solved by the Venezuelans, without any foreign interference.
Now we head to Brazil, where students and teachers are on strike in defense of education. Many of the demonstrations haven't yet started, but it is already being called the biggest protest so far against the government of Jair Bolsonaro. Across the country, demonstrators are holding marches, events, and occupying universities. They are rejecting the announcement of a 30% cut to the public education budget. The government says the measures are necessary and called Brazil's higher education sector a mess. The cuts could force the closure of dozens of teaching institutions across the country due to a lack of funds for basic necessities, including water and electricity. Thousands of teachers and doctors have once again taken to the streets of Tegucigalpa, Honduras, to protest against plans to privatize education and health services. The protest was called by the Teachers Union and the Honduran Medical Association, who say the plans will lead to mass layoffs in the public sector. This is the third time in 4 weeks that teachers and doctors have protested against the plan. Last month, 3 people were injured after police attacked protesting teachers and doctors.
What we want is to abolish all the MPCS, I mean the legislative decrees, and start dialogue between health and education with the state about what we really want, which is to capitalize free education and health, and above all, better spaces for health and education.
Supporters of Guatemala's former Attorney General Telma Aldana have gathered outside the Constitutional Court demanding that she be allowed to run for president. The Constitutional Court will decide on Wednesday whether Aldana will be allowed to run in the upcoming election. Aldana is currently facing arrest on charges of alleged embezzlement and tax fraud. Her party, the Semilla Movement, has been requesting her immunity, but the Supreme Court rejected the request on Monday.
We have no doubt that there is no legal basis to bar Thelma Aldana from the presidential race. These are political expressions of fear of a captured state and political institutions.
The economic blockade imposed on Venezuela since 2015 has made it difficult for citizens to access medicine and has caused a resurgence of illnesses that were previously controlled. The sanctions have also caused tens of thousands of deaths.
Venezuela has been facing a medicine and food shortage since 2015, caused by the economic sanctions driven by the United States, and formally implemented in 2017.
La banca internacional tiembla cuando ve.
International banks shake when they see a request from Venezuela. They say they cannot work with the Bolivarian Republic, not even to assist with the supply of medicines, food, supplies, or vaccines. They say they won't work with us. This is an act of criminal aggression.
In July 2017, Citibank denied Venezuela the funds needed to import 300,000 insulin doses. That impacted 450,000 patients. In October, the Swiss bank blocked resources for vaccines acquired through the Pan American Health Organization that delayed vaccination plans for 4 months.
We have that money to purchase medicines. This violates international law and agreements with the UN. I lay blame at the feet of Donald Trump and Julio Borges, who are responsible for these blockades.
In 2017, Colombia blocked 2 million doses of anti-malaria vaccines. In the same year, the pharmaceutical companies Baxter, Cipher, Novartis and Abbott denied certificates of exportation of medicines for cancer. In May 2018, international banks blocked the payment of $7 million for dialysis supplies. 15,000 patients could have benefited from that treatment for free.
We continue to reinforce our ties with Russia and China in an attempt to mitigate these challenges. But those are alternative mechanisms that take time. As such, problems inevitably arise, but we work hard to solve them.
Pan American Health Organization figures show that 8.5 million children were vaccinated against measles in March 2019. Meanwhile, more than 5 million children between the ages of 7 and 15 were vaccinated against diphtheria. This occurred in spite of the economic sanctions.
Venezuela has recognized the continued support from the Pan American Health Organization, which has allowed us to maintain our vaccination efforts, even with pharmaceutical companies blocking us from getting medicines.
A recent report by the international organization known as the Center for Economic Policy Research has found that 40,000 Venezuelans have died as a result of the sanctions applied since 2017.
U.S. sanctions are deliberately aiming to wreck Venezuela's economy and force a regime change. This is fruitless, heartless, illegal, and failed policy, causing grave harm to the Venezuelan people.
If the blockades do not stop, around 300,000 people will be at risk of dying. This includes people living with AIDS or patients in need of medicine for dialysis, cancer, hypertension, or diabetes.
We'll take a short break. Don't go away.
Follow the most important global events through a comprehensive perspective. With a team of journalists in 25 locations around the world to convey our people's reality. From the South, weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Welcome back. An oversight committee of Ecuador's National Assembly has recommended that the former Foreign Minister Maria Fernanda Espinosa face a vote of political censure by the full Assembly. Espinosa, who currently serves as President of the United Nations General Assembly, is accused of meddling with the naturalization process of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange in 2017. She's also accused of mishandling the situation of Ecuadorians living in Venezuela and the case of murdered journalists in northern Ecuador. Let's hear from our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, with the latest.
The Legislative Justice Commission of the National Assembly of Ecuador approved a report in which they recommend the impeachment against the former Foreign Minister of Ecuador, Maria Fernanda Espinosa. According to this report, they found irregularities in the citizenship process granted to Julian Assange, and also they found irregularities in the murder of the commercial newspaper team in the border with Colombia. Recently, in an interview with Telesur, the current UN General Assembly President rejected this allegation and also said that offering the nationality status to Julian Assange was a fully thought out decision.
That was Denise Herrera from Quito. And 2 people have been killed and at least 8 others injured in Colombia after a judicial commission was bombed near the Venezuelan border. The attack happened in the border region of Catatumbo while members of a municipal court were being escorted by police and military forces. A judge and 3 policemen are among the wounded. Authorities are still looking into who is behind the attack. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration has downgraded Costa Rica's air safety rating. Authorities say Costa Rica does not comply with international civil aviation safety standards. Now, with only a Category 2 rating, Costa Rica will not be allowed to establish new services to U.S. destinations, but the country's carriers can continue operating existing routes to the U.S. We continue in Costa Rica. Several lakes have dried up in the capital, San Juan. A drought has hit the region as a result of El Niño phenomenon.
Before, on Sundays, I used to come here to the lake of La Paz Park. I came as a family with my wife, with my son, and we enjoyed riding in the boats that had the gentleman who provided the services.
That was a report from San Jose. Now we go to Bolivia. The country has been proposed as the headquarters of an international institute of indigenous languages. Let's learn more.
The Ibero-American Institute of Indigenous Languages could have Bolivia as its headquarters. It was announced following a conversation in La Paz between the Ibero-American General Secretary Rebecca Greenspan and Bolivian Foreign Minister Diego Pari.
We want to consolidate the Ibero-American Institute of Indigenous Languages in Bolivia. We are planning to make Bolivia the place where you can collect all the experiences that are generated in the field of indigenous languages in Ibero-America.
The International Year of Indigenous Languages is one of the Bolivian initiatives in the United Nations. In favor of these people, in Bolivia, 32 of 36 institutes of indigenous languages have already been created to recover and strengthen the native languages.
Many times, when we talk about indigenous people, we always refer to over 500 years ago, but we are also the present, and we are also the future.
The creation of the Ibero-American Institute of Indigenous Languages was proposed by Bolivia in 2006. It is hoped that it will be realized next year at the Ibero-American Summit of Heads of State that will meet in Andorra in southwestern Europe.
There are between 6,000 and 7,000 languages, but 95% of the world population speaks only 26 languages. And therefore, the 5 million indigenous people of the world speak 96% of the rest of the languages there are in the world.
Experts say that in the last century, 4 languages disappeared per year, which implies the loss of 400 languages. It is estimated that by the end of this century, 50% of the languages of the planet could die.
In Latin America, there are 800 indigenous communities, and at least a fifth have ceased actively using their heritage languages. And more than 200 languages are spoken by less than 10,000 people and are in danger of extinction.
In order to preserve native languages, so far, 10 indigenous universities have been created on the continent. 3 of them are located in Bolivia. During this visit of the Ibero-American Secretary, the immediate exchange of students, teachers, and researchers was agreed upon.
Greek billionaire and Coca-Cola bottling heir Alki David has posted bail of $300,000 and reportedly left St. Kitts a day after he was arrested on drug charges. He allegedly smuggled $1.3 million worth of cannabis plants into the island. David said the transportation of the 5,000 plants was legal, as he intended to develop a cannabis business in the region. It's yet to be seen whether cannabis will be legal on the island by the time David is scheduled to appear in court on September 23rd. Legislation is to be passed in St. Kitts, allowing its use for medicinal purposes. Meanwhile, citizens and residents of St. Kitts and Nevis have strongly condemned what they say was a disrespectful rant by the Greek billionaire. In the hours after his arrest, David sent veiled threats to the country's Prime Minister, Timothy Harris, on social media.
Mr. Harris, PM, you're going to get a fisting, baby. Literally a legal fisting like no other. Stand by.
A nationwide manhunt is underway in Trinidad and Tobago after 8 prisoners broke out of the Golden Grove maximum security prison. The 8 inmates are believed to have escaped overnight. Prison officers found a hole dug under one of the prison fences. The men were discovered to be missing during the routine morning roll call. Police are also warning members of the public, especially those in East Trinidad, to be on alert. They have also asked anyone with relevant information to call the nearest police station. We have more stories coming up. Stay with us.